successful water-wise garden starts with good landscape design principles, the right selection of plants and smart planning. So who better to chat to about water-conscious design than landscape architect John Patric. So when it comes to water-wise design, do you approach it in the same way as you do everyday design?
Yeah, I do. I do a little bit more thinking though. I try and think carefully about how I place things around the landscape, and I try and divide the landscape into 3 different zones. If you like, I like to have what I might call the oasis zone close to the house, a little bit greener, a little bit more lush, the place where people might want to sit and eat outside. Then I accept the fact that water from there, if it rains or if there's excess water, will flow off onto another area. So you might say I have a second zone where there may be some irrigation, there may be some water runoff. It's perhaps not as well watered as that oasis zone, but it's the next zone. And then I have a zone, when I think about it, which is not watered at all, if you like, further from the house. That's particularly on bigger blocks. I like to think about the outer part of the bigger block of land not being irrigated, whereas close to the house, climate modification, climate control, it's important that you do keep that watered so it's a little bit more lush, and people want to be there then. On this piece of garden where I'm gardening here, this is on the south side of the house. There's a little bit of shade, a little bit of protection. It doesn't get watered perhaps more than a couple of hours a week. Drip irrigation, so it's not watered very much. But if you compare it with the north side of my house, where it's exposed to the full wind and the full sun, you've got to realize you're working with 2 very different microclimates. And I think that's fundamental to an understanding of designing a low water garden.
So do you think that a water-wise garden can also be beautiful and practical?
Of course it can, yeah. I mean, just looking here, we've got a little plant called Artemisia canescens, which you probably know, that beautiful, almost like a bit of wire mesh rolled up. It's very, very drought tolerant, very tough, and yet it's the most beautiful of plants in my view. Many of the agapanthus, I mean, I know some are weeds, but if you choose some of the really beautiful cultivars, some of them can be sterile, they're not very water demanding. The yuccas, I mean, that is the most beautiful plant with those broad leaves, not very water demanding. Buddleia crispa, those big silver leaves over there, not water demanding. And there's arbutus, which is my favourite plant. I mean, they are all plants of great beauty, but none of them are hugely water demanding. They're not cacti, they're not absolutely drought tolerant, but they're not got a huge water demand. The garden that's in here at the moment is designed really, A, to be a little bit drought tolerant, but secondly to tolerate staffies, the family dogs running through it. So this is really robust. They can push their way through the grass, but the grass is also pretty drought tolerant.
So what do you think is the future of gardening?
Well, I think we're going to have to work very hard at making sure we use every bit of water. Our engineers up till the present time have worked really hard at putting in good drains, making sure we get rid of every bit of water, making sure it never floods, being hypersensitive about getting rid of water. And we're having to rethink some of that engineering, not only in our gardens, but in our streets too. So I'm thinking much more towards dishing beds. I'm looking at using sort of soakaways, leading as much water off the roof into my garden rather than down the drains. We're looking at putting in water tanks. There's barely a garden these days where we don't put in some water tanks, whether it be 10,000 litres underground or 3,000 litres in series. And those sorts of things are really going to be very important for us to think about. How can we keep water on the site rather than getting rid of it? Because that water you keep on the site is going to be critical for growing plants.